This video is actually about gardening, and you see a couple of Knitting Nancy and a spool knitter here. And this is a method of gardening that I have invented. I'm probably going to apply for a patent on this, but I'm sharing it now so that people can help out. In the pandemic, we have seen that food is not as available as normal, and you should watch some of the news stories on farmers and how they're destroying their crops because they can't get them to the stores. And we need to help. We each need to help. So I am growing pumpkins, onions, beets, clover, and dandelions for greens. And you can put together a very simple herb or vegetable garden, or you can even grow marigolds and use them dry them and use them as insect repellent or mouse repellent. There are many, many uses for plants, and a majority of our chemicals, medicines, are derived originally from plants. So you can become a master gardener, and if you don't want to do that, and you don't have the space to dig a garden, this might be an option for you. So I have a 6-foot by 10-foot garden dug. The cow manure should be here today, so I can mix that in. And the pumpkins are going to take the most space. I talked to my brother, who's an organic farmer in northern Maine, and he said all plants try to be the best. So the pumpkins have 2-foot wide leaves. And he said, with my small garden, the best thing to do is to train the plants to go around the circumference of the garden. And that way they won't take up all the space. But I'm thinking it might be easier. I have a landlord that comes through and mows around the garden. So I also have to have things clearly defined so the mower can work around whatever I'm growing. I have a couple of options. I can either do as he suggested and kind of crowd plants in. I can dig a bigger space for that garden, make the garden longer, or add a square off to the side for beets or something. I have large flower boxes that are about 2.5, some of them might be 3 feet long, and they're about 8 inches deep, which means they're deep enough for beets, onions, certainly the clover. Red clover, though, does get tall. It's not the small white clover, and I'm growing red clover. So that's the second option, are flower boxes, where you buy the dirt, fill the box, grow the food or the plant. This is a third option, which I am doing now for some of the plants, but I'm also developing this. I feel an obligation to save the Opuntia humifusa. They're endangered. They're the one cactus that's native to Massachusetts, where I live. They have a few problems, mainly black rot. And for some reason, mine haven't bloomed in a couple of years. So there's something going on with them that they're not getting. And cacti are one of the easiest plants to grow. As far as I know, they don't need a certain fungus or anything to bloom. It might be the population of bees being decimated in a lot of places. I do have quite a number of bumblebees around, so I'm not sure if they need a certain bee. So that's an experiment, but in the meantime, I need to save them. This is called strip gardening. And one thing my brother mentioned the other day was that a lot of people, I have a good yard. A lot of people live in apartments. They might only have a patio. This is something you can do on a patio in a flower box. But it gives the plants and the seeds an advantage, which is why I'm developing it. This is a knitting spool, and you see about 5 rows knit. And then it gets a little bit tighter right there. And then if you look at it this way, I'm using dog food as an example. This is going to be a seed strip. And I'm going to start with beets. Ideally, I would like to be doing it with Knitting Nancy's because of the tightness of the knitting. I'm testing it out on this one because I may have to do it a little bit differently with the Nancy's. But this is an average spool knitter that you can find anywhere. You can make your own out of an old wooden spool of thread and put 4 nails on the top and do the same thing, but you're going to get a very thin knitting, which is going to be more similar to this. So it'll depend on the seed size of what you're growing. So this is a piece of dog food in there. And the pattern for doing this is knit 5 rows normally on a Knitting Nancy. And then after the 5th row, which I have just done there, this is like a 6th and a 7th row. You're going to take your yarn and you're going to wrap it back and forth in a flower shape. And then knit those over and for 2 rows. And what that does is hold your seed, or in this case the dog food, in place. So now I'm going to go back to normal knitting for another 5 rows. Put a piece of dog food in there, and then do 2 rows over it by knitting back and forth any way you want. It doesn't have to be specific. You just want to hold what will be the seed. You want to make sure that seed, or in this case dog food, gets held in place. And you can see that by going back to normal knitting and just doing the 5 rows, I'm giving space between seeds. So now in this example, that will give me about 1.5 inches between seeds. That will be fine for beets or onions. But with the cacti, when I get to the cacti, I'm going to want them at least 6 inches apart. So I would knit for 6 inches, do 2 rows, and you want to make sure that before you pull this down, your 2 rows that hold that in place are over what will be the seed. And then when you pull that down, and this one is just kind of stuck, the dog food is too big to go down through the hole. But when you pull that down with the seed in it, you want to make sure the knitting is over there. And it'll put the seed in the tube. And like I started to say, with the punches, I want them at least 6 inches apart. So I will knit 6 inches between each little pocket I make like that. And what I'm doing, and the reason I'm talking about this now, I have a 10-foot by 6-foot garden. I need to make 10-foot long strands with the seeds in there. And these are the beets. Now, with beets or onions, this is wool. What the wool is going to do is absorb moisture. So I'm going to bury this. Beets need to be about 1/2 inch down. I'm going to bury this 1/2 inch down. The wool is going to absorb the moisture. It's going to help the seed germinate, and the wool will break down and fall apart. And it's a natural fiber that'll just work into the soil. Over time, it'll get used by little animals. It'll just become part of the dirt, which is why you have to add cow manure. You have to keep the composting going. But anyway, this strand will be buried 1/2 inch down, and so when the seeds start to germinate, they're going to grow right through this. The roots will go down, the plant will go up. If you've ever started any kind of a seed, they don't stop because wool is in their way. So they're going to go right up, and that's going to keep the whole row of beets in a row. Now, it's called strip gardening because I can take a hoe and a small spade and make a 10-foot wide strip of dirt next to my bigger garden area and put in a strip of beets. Now, if I decide to do the flower boxes, if this is 10 feet long, I can fold it in half in a 4-foot wide flower box, line it a half an inch, plant it a half an inch down under the soil in a circle, and I'll have a crown of beets. So you can see how most people, when they sow seeds, these are quite large beet seeds, and obviously you make a little hole in the dirt with your finger, you put the seed in, you pat it back over again, and you hope it's in a spot where it gets enough rain or moisture or whatever. A lot of times, if you don't have a sprinkler and you're using a watering can, the seeds can get dislodged if you water on top of a seed. This prevents a lot of that. You water your whole garden, the wool is going to soak up the water. It's going to make sure your seeds get moisture. I think it's going to be vital, actually, for people that live in apartments that can buy a bag of dirt, put it in a pot, and knit a strand, and these are probably going to be for Opuntia that I'm going to put in every 6 inches, and in the fall I'm going to bury this. Opuntias and some other plants need a cold treatment to germinate and grow. So I put this in the ground, and in the spring they get their cold treatment by being in here. They still get moisture, they're still in the ground, and in the spring they're ready to pop right out of this because they've gotten their cold treatment and their moisture, and they're still, I can leave an end of this sticking up out of the ground and I know exactly where they are. With the Opuntia, even as small plants, I could pull this whole thing up out of the ground and have all my plants right in a row. I think it is going to be vital for anybody that wants to grow anything in a small space. And like I said, I'm probably going to apply for either a patent or a copyright or one of those options. It's about $400 to apply for each patent, and I have a couple of things that I want to do that with. But what I'm going to be doing this year is testing this, because part of the patent application process is proving that it is actually what it is. So don't anybody try to steal my patent, because today's date will be on here. And I don't normally say that about things, but I think this is going to make a difference. Large farmers can't take the time to do something like this, but the rest of us who need to grow our own food can.